Greetings, friends. David Marks here. There's an experimental new feature inside of Adobe Photoshop Lightroom Classic, which uses artificial intelligence to reshape the depth of field in a digital photograph. The algorithms that Lens Blur uses are still a work in progress, but on some images, this new tool already produces fantastic results. I'll show you the good, the bad, and the ugly in this tutorial, and I'll teach you everything that you need to know about this new tool. If you're ready, let's jump right in and let's get started. I like this photo, but the background is cluttered and busy. To fix that, I'm going to use the new Lens Blur tool, which lives midway down in the right-hand sidebar of Lightroom Classic version 13. To activate the Lens Blur feature, all that I have to do is to click here beside the word Apply. And once I do that, Lightroom will immediately invoke its artificial intelligence engine to try to identify the subject of this photo for me. Once the AI has found the subject, it will automatically add some blur to the background. If I want to control the strength of the blur that's being added, then I can drag this blur amount slider to the left or to the right. Cranking this one all the way up to 100% makes the image look kind of phony, but around 40%, I think the blur looks pretty realistic. If I zoom in to 100% and turn this tool on and off, look what a great job it did building a mask around my friend's head. I think this is pretty great, and the addition of Lens Blur definitely helps to keep my attention on their smiling faces and not on all of that distracting stuff that's happening in the background. I'm going to hop over to another example. I picked smartphone images only for this lesson because with our phones, we don't have the ability to change the aperture. In this photo, for example, my original capture is sharp from the coffee table in the foreground all the way to the back to the far side of the hotel lobby. Since there was no way that I could limit the depth of field when I took this shot with my phone, I'm going to activate the Lens Blur feature again. Next, watch what happens when I drag this little rectangle in the focal range indicator to the left and the right. When I move this one around, I'm shifting the plane of focus. If I want to narrow the zone of crisp detail down even more, then I can move the endpoints of this rectangle in towards the center. Or I can drag this zone out to expand the crisp detail. To understand this focal range diagram, think of this whole line as if it were a map that shows the distance of the objects inside of your photograph away from your camera. When you move the rectangle to the left, you're telling Lightroom to set the focus on the areas that it believes were the closest to the camera. And when you move this rectangle over to the right, you're shifting the focal plane over the parts of the image that the AI thinks were furthest away. If you want to see the depth map that the AI created, if you want to see its guess about what's near and what's far, then tap on this box beside the words Visualize Depth. When the screen looks like this, Lightroom is using warm and cool colors to represent different distances. The areas beneath the warmest colors, the light yellows, these are the parts of the image that the AI believes were close to the camera when this image was captured. The red and orange areas, to the AI, those areas are a bit more distant. And the purple and then the gray areas at the back, those are the area it thinks were even further away. In this case, I think that the AI did a great job. So I'm going to set my focal range from about 1 to about 40. And I'm going to adjust the blur amount to about 35. I'm going to do this so that the front end of the photo stays sharp and the far side of the image falls out of focus. There's another way to see what areas will remain sharp and which parts will be blurred when you're working with this focal range control. If you hold down the Alt Option key on a Mac, that's the Alt key on a PC, with one finger, while you click and hold the cursor inside this box, then you'll see a slightly different type of overlay. While you have the Alt key held down, the areas in white are the parts of the image where no blur is being introduced, and the colored areas indicate the parts where some lens blur is happening. I find this view helpful when I want to make small refinements to the focal range for even more precision. At this point, I'm going to hide all of my panels away, and I'm going to split my screen so that you can see our original image on the left and the blurred version on the right. If I zoom in, this looks great to me, and the final image looks more like something that I would get from my DSLR camera than what I expect out of my smartphone. In this case, we got great results because the depth map that the AI created was super accurate. Unfortunately, that kind of accuracy is not guaranteed. So let's move on to another example where we're going to need to do a bit more work. As I was walking by this lovely scene a couple years ago, I stopped and snapped this image with my phone. Now, I didn't think about it at the time, but like so many shots with my smartphone, this one has too much depth of field. So, to hide some of those background distractions, I'm going to activate the new lens blur feature. When I do this, I have to give the AI credit for properly identifying that it's this part of the flower bed that it should remain in focus. I'm going to tighten the focal range up a little bit here. I'm going to shift this over so it's a little bit more on the front side. And at first glance, this looks great. But if I zoom in here, then perhaps you can see some of the problems. Do you see here how the base of this flower is sharp, but when the blur is on, how the top gets all blurred away? If I turn the visualized depth map on, then perhaps you can see here in the diagram how the AI believes this is close, but that is far, when in reality, they're both parts of the same plant. It can be frustrating when you run into problems like this, but Lightroom offers a partial solution with this new tool. If I click on the disclosure triangle here beside the word refine, then another section of this panel will appear. Here, we can use a brush tool to paint over additional areas where we want to add or remove the simulated lens blur. In this case, I want to remove some of the blur, so I'm going to tap on the focus option. Next, I'm going to set the amount down to about 50. I'm going to adjust my brush dynamics, and I'm going to cut the flow down to about 20%. I find that working with this brush tool is frustrating, but at least I can set myself up for higher odds of success if I reduce the amount and the flow controls before I start painting. Once I have everything set up, I can change the brush size using the left and right bracket keys on my keyboard. Now, I'm going to paint over the parts of the flower that I want to keep in focus. At first, it will appear as if nothing is happening. That's okay, because I have the amount and the flow turned way down. And right now, I'm just trying to tell the computer where I want to alter the mask. When I think that I've covered the whole area that I want to change a few times, then I can raise the amount slider until this part of the flower looks about as sharp as the parts at the bottom. I may need to do a little bit more painting, but as you can see, I can restore some focus in this part of the image. If it helps, you can check your work by enabling the depth mask again. And what we're looking for here is a decent match in the color overlay for the area that we just painted on and its surroundings. So in this case, I'm trying to match sort of this orange and that orange so that it believes they're both at the same depth. If there are other parts of this image, like the tip of this flower here, that also need some improvement, then you can paint over them too. If this area is going to need a different setting for the amount slider, then I can tap on this tiny little plus icon before I start painting to create a completely separate brush command. There may be more areas that need touch-up in here, but I think you get the idea. We've gone from this to this, and some of those distracting elements in the background have been blurred away. All in all, I'm pleased. So let me show you two more refinements using another example that you might find interesting. When I activate the lens blur tool this time, the AI does an adequate job creating a depth map, but the computer really has no idea which part of this image I want to keep in focus. It chose to blur the far distant stuff, but maybe I want to blur the stuff that's up close. If I want to keep this area, the midground, for example, sharp, then I could move the focal range control around, but there's an alternative. To tell the AI what area I'm interested in, I can activate this little target button right here. Now, wherever I tap on the image will become the focal target. I can tap here, I can tap here, or I can tap back there. That's a nice feature, but it's really no different than moving the focal range controls by hand. What we haven't talked about yet, and what is different, are the options that I can reveal if I tap on this little disclosure triangle to the right of the word bokeh. In here, the Adobe engineers have given us 5 different styles of lens bokeh that we can play with. If you hover the cursor over one of these boxes, then it will tell you what type of lens that option simulates. To see the effect that choosing one of these styles has, watch these fuzzy circular dots where the building lights are being blurred. If you want to make these simulated lens bokeh effects even more noticeable, then you can drag the boost slider to the right. Personally, I don't foresee myself using this feature very often because I've never been that interested in lens bokeh in real life. But on the right image, changing the shape of your out of focus highlight rings might be a nice touch. Well, there you go. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful. If you learned something today, then please leave us a like or a comment down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in our next tutorial.